Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. This will most likely be my last podcast before going to bed, and it has been an interesting day, but that's a different subject. I'll just say that I had my first meeting today with a 9/11 survivor, somebody who actually was literally there. And I don't want to get more specific because it's kind of disgusting. Some of the things that he saw, really disgusting in terms of, let me just say, physical remains. Uh, but he was there. He was among them, and he is a survivor. I've known this guy for a long time, about a year, but I didn't know that he was a survivor of 9/11. I won't mention his name, his occupation, but my hat goes off to him. And the fact that he has come through this in one piece that shows the strength of his character. Now, on to the topic of this podcast. And that is, in a sense, a continuation of what I just said, but in a different way. The subject of heroism. I think that in Maoism-Third Worldism, we need a tradition of heroism. So far as I know, we don't have that. So, for example, I think that Red Pagan Nicole, Jason Unruh, and a variety of others should be considered to be heroes in Maoism-Third Worldism. Maybe I could think of about 5 or 6 people that I would add to that list. Now, I'm not sure what we would do with that, but what I think that it might accomplish, at the very least, is establishing ourselves as a tendency devoted to heroism. Heroism in the pursuit of communism and socialism. And as I see it, there is no greater heroism than that. I mean, what else can we do in the world today that is beneficial to humanity in the long term, except fight for the eventual rise of communism and socialism? That is not to say that we shouldn't fight for other things as well. But the highest pursuit, in my opinion, should be for communism and socialism. And there are certain individuals, and I won't mention any others because the list would get too long, who I think deserve to be included on that list. Certainly not me. I definitely deserve to be on another list, a list of newcomers, because I have not been around that long. I am certainly not a hero of Maoism-Third Worldism. I love Maoism-Third Worldism, but I'm a lover of Maoism-Third Worldism, not a hero of it. And there are plenty of individuals who are heroes of it. I don't know where we can go with that, whether we can perhaps create a series of podcasts on these individuals, while when requested, preserving their anonymity, but talking about the things that they have done. But I do think that that is an important step in solidifying our presence in the left world. The left is sadly divided, and most leftists, unfortunately, are first worldists, meaning that, like Marx and Engels, they believe that communism and socialism will be established in the first world. Now, they may occasionally give mention to the third world, but primarily that's not what their focus is on. Primarily, they are focusing on the places where they live. And generally, at least in my experience, those places are in the first world. Now, I realize that there are exceptions to that. I'm aware of communist organizations and groups in certain third world countries. I guess I'm talking about my own life and what I have seen around me. Every single communist tendency that I have been a part of, other than Maoism, Third Worldism, has been devoted to the first world, and in effect has accepted the premise that communism can and perhaps will be initially established in the first world. As a Maoist third worldist, well, I'm not going to dismiss that possibility. I am not a prophet or a prognosticator, as I've said before, but I think that is highly unlikely. We have only to look back at Marx and Engels, who predicted the rise of communism in various European countries at the end of the 19th century. Their predictions were wrong. Now, have there been successful communist revolutions in the first world? Well, I suppose it depends on how one defines the first world. In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. But where I see the greatest amount of dialectical potential, or perhaps, to coin a term, dialectical energy, is in the third world. I know, for example, in my trips to Mexico, which is only 2 miles away from me, in my conversations with various people, especially this one individual I know who lives in Mexico, in a place called Nuevo Progreso. He owns a leather goods store, is a very good man, and he is a communist. Now, perhaps you might see that as a contradiction, but we live in a capitalist world, and he has to make a living. Mexico is a very poor country. If he did not own that store, I don't know how he could live. I would not call him, however, a capitalist. Why? Because he has no employees. He doesn't pay wages. The store is entirely run, managed, and staffed by himself. That's it. So he really is not a capitalist. He is a merchant, but not a capitalist. So I would question anybody who would assert that my friend really is a capitalist. I don't think he is, but he is a very noble individual in my view. And I think eventually, based on my conversations with him, that he might eventually become a Maoist third worldist. I am not aware of the current status of Maoism third worldism outside of the US. I suppose I should be, but I really have not become acquainted with it yet. For example, I don't know whether there is any established tradition of Maoism third worldism in Mexico. But he may be, this friend of mine, and I won't give his name out of respect for his privacy, he may become the first, perhaps, Maoist third worldist and very devoted Maoist third worldist in Mexico. He speaks fluent English and fluent Spanish, of course, has a family that lives right outside of Nuevo Progreso. Really, nobody lives in Nuevo Progreso. It is a tourist town. It was not started as a tourist town, but it's become that. It is known primarily for medical tourism, but also other kinds of tourism as well. And it is a safe place to go. Sadly, the reason why it is so safe is because the Mexican government pays off the cartels not to come into Nuevo Progreso and to harass and perhaps kill the merchants and tourists who visit the city. That's very, very sad. But such is the state of modern Mexico. Many third world countries are in a similar condition. Their countries are basically run by gangs. Gangs often have more power than the governments themselves. And that is certainly the case in Mexico. You could very legitimately, I think, refer to the cartels as gangs, like the Crips and the Bloods, for example, or various motorcycle gangs or various criminal gangs, whatever. That is the kind of system which currently exists in Mexico. The cartels literally are more powerful in Mexico than the Mexican government itself. There's nothing that I can do to change that. I am just an individual. I don't operate a military force. I cannot go in and fight the cartels. Plus, I'm too old. I'm 68 years old. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I have never held a gun in my life. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's true. I have never held a gun in my life. Not to say I wouldn't be willing to under certain circumstances, but so far I have not done that because I have never felt the necessity for it. However, in Mexico, there are a lot of people with guns, and most of them are pretty bad. The police themselves in Mexico, the military itself in Mexico, is basically paid off by the cartels. Right here where I live, in Hidalgo County, Texas, right on the Mexican border, the same thing is true. Many, if not most, Border Patrol agents, many people in local police office departments, many state troopers who work in this area are also paid off by the cartels. Periodically, you will see stories, basically at least once or twice a month, of a law enforcement officer right here in the US who has been arrested for receiving payback from the cartels. So this guy is very heroic. As a communist, he is willing to stand up to the cartels, and he does stand up to them in a very definitive way. I will not get into the specifics because to do so might reveal too much about his identity. But he's a great man, and I think, for example, he might be a person, should he decide to become a Maoist-Third worldist, to add to our list of the honored ones, a kind of role of people who should be honored, people who, like an honors list, people who really have earned that honor. I certainly have not. I hope I do sometime in the future, but not yet. But again, there are people who have, and there are people who may in the near future, perhaps this man I know in Mexico. So that's my suggestion. You can take it as you like, but again, I would like to see some type of honors of given to people who are heroes in the Maoist third worldist tendency. We need that. It is a booster, especially now, especially right now in 2024. We need that kind of thing to increase our solidarity, in my opinion. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.